Let's bring in, to talk more about that testimony, we have Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson joining us to talk more about what we've just witnessed. What do you make of what we've seen so far in this 9th hearing?
So I think it's exactly what we were promised, which is hearing more about what the president did and frankly failed to do during those 3 hours. When we heard in the prior hearings what the president was told before January 6th, we heard what he said despite what he was told. And now what we're hearing is what he didn't do despite what he was asked to do. And I think it's very powerful testimony. Let's again remember, we're hearing from people who worked for him. We're not hearing from Democrats. We're not hearing from members of the Biden campaign. We're hearing from people who worked in the White House, who were there to advise the president, who consistently said, you must do something to stop that. And instead, what he did was, frankly, the opposite.
What did you make of the testimony from former Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews when she was asked about how hard would it have been for the president, who was said to be in the dining room, walk to the press briefing to take to the podium and address the American people? And her answer was it would have taken about 60 seconds for him to do that. And the fact that he didn't, what do you make of that?
So I think it, again, just shows us that obviously this is a president of the United States. He has the biggest bullhorn in the world, the biggest bully pulpit in the world. And he could easily have gone to any microphone, in this case, maybe the most famous microphone in America, and said, okay, go home, stop this. Don't be violent. This was, in fact, a legitimate election. And any type of violence is completely unacceptable. He didn't do that. What he did is he watched TV and ate his dinner. It was interesting that she emphasized how easy it was to be able to get to the White House briefing room, and the fact that they had the map out there. I thought it was fascinating that they're basically showing everybody, look, if you're in your own home, you just have to walk down the hall.
Right. Well, tonight's hearing, the 9th, as mentioned, is led by Representative Adam Kinzinger, the Illinois Republican, and then also from Virginia, Representative Elaine Luria. We want to play a moment from her where she talked about the take care clause as his role as it relates to his constitutional duty as President of the United States. Let's go ahead and listen.
The President also assumes the constitutional duty to take care that our nation's laws be faithfully executed, and is the commander-in-chief of our military. Our hearings have shown the many ways in which President Trump tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power in the days leading up to January 6th. With each step of his plan, he betrayed his oath of office and was derelict in his duty.
Derelict in his duty. As mentioned over and over, this is the 9th hearing. Jessica, do you think that all of this testimony has in fact proven this? And if so, what will come of it?
What will come of it? I mean, isn't that the huge question, which is obviously we're not in a courtroom right now. We're in a political forum. We're in a political hearing. And so of course, we know that the members of the committee have legal power. They can subpoena people. They can ask people to testify under oath, but it's not the same as a Department of Justice investigation. And so what will Merrick Garland do? What will the Attorney General do as a result of all of this information? And the answer is, of course, we don't know. I think it was yesterday that he said, no person is above the law. Of course, I think that. Given everything that has come out, I think that there is a rational question now as to not Merrick Garland having to explain why he, in fact, decided to, if he does, file charges against the president, but why he doesn't decide to, because we do have so much evidence here. I thought that portion you played was really important, that issue of the dereliction of duty, because that is not in the federal criminal code. What is, though, in the Constitution is the so-called take care clause that we heard a number of the members of Congress pointing to. And that is both a grant of authority to the president and a limit on the authority. It says you get to execute the laws, but you must do that faithfully. And what everyone understands is, at the very least, it means the president doesn't try to violate the law.
Well, you brought up the fact that this isn't about Republican or Democrat, because we're hearing all from his now former allies, one of those being, who is really tight in his circle, was Pat Cipolloni, former White House counsel to the president, and then also Cassidy Hutchinson. And they were asked about Trump, the former president, of course, telling people his inability to tell people to leave the Capitol. And this is what they said.
Your advice was tell people to leave the Capitol, and it took over 2 hours when there were subsequent statements made, tweets put forth that in your view were insufficient. Did you continue, Mr. Cipolloni, throughout the period of time up until 4/17, continue, you and others, to push for a stronger statement?
Yes.
Were you joined in that effort by Ivanka Trump?
Yes.
Eric Hershey?
Yes.
By Mark Meadows?
Yes.
White House counsel's office wanted there to be a strong statement out to condemn the rioters. I'm confident in that. I'm confident that Ivanka Trump wanted there to be a strong statement to condemn the rioters.
So talking about the dereliction of duty then, Jessica, that's essentially what they're saying, is that he was derelict in that.
Absolutely. What they're saying is that inaction was, in fact, more harmful than action, that there were some tweets that were sent, but in some ways I heard them say it was worse than no tweet at all, that, for instance, he's pouring fuel on the fire, or I think the term they used was giving the green light to the rioters. We heard such consistent testimony again, and I think that's what's been fascinating throughout these hearings, is that the under oath testimony, again, by people who worked for the president, who presumably wanted him to win that election and wanted him to continue to be president, has been very consistent. And in this case, the consistent narrative is, we told the president, we told him for hours, we told him to call them off. And we'd actually heard, I think it was last hearing, we heard from one of the rioters who said, yeah, if the president had told us to stop, to go home, we would have gone home.
Another thing that Pat Cipolloni said, everyone that we've heard from was asked about the chance that were heard about the Vice President, Mike Pence, to hang the Vice President, and the fact that the president himself didn't push back enough on that at all and really incited that. That's what, to summarize what has been said before. To that point, here's a security official we heard from tonight in deposition about the fear that was in the Vice President Pence's security detail as the Capitol was being mobbed.
The members of the VP detail at this time were starting to fear for their own lives. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of very personal calls over the radio. So it was disturbing. I don't like talking about it, but there were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth. It was getting, for whatever the reason was on the ground, the VP detail thought that this was about to get very ugly.
It was about to get very ugly. What do you make of that?
I actually thought that was some of the most powerful testimony, that here you have somebody charged with security for our nation saying that we were worried not just about the vice president, which is alarming enough, but worried about themselves, making calls to say goodbye, apparently, to family members. And I also thought some of the most powerful testimony was apparently Mark Meadows saying, yeah, the president has heard that these rioters are threatening Vice President Pence, and he thinks he deserves it. I'm, of course, paraphrasing here, and we should go with the under oath testimony. But this is consistent with what we heard last hearing and or a hearing ago, which is that President Trump was aware that Vice President Pence that they were chanting, let's hang him, let's do great harm to him, and that he felt that that was deserved because he wasn't showing the quote unquote courage to, well, frankly, violate his constitutional duty and fail to certify the Electoral College vote.
Okay, we're getting word that the hearing is set to resume in about 45 seconds. So far, though, I just want to get your take on this. Adam Kinzinger, of course, one of the leaders of tonight's hearing, was saying that this one tonight will open people's eyes in a big way. Do you think that that has been successful thus far?
So, you know, I think it's been successful in the sense that people are open to hearing it. And if people think this is just a witch hunt and none of this is true, then no, there's very little you can do to break through, I think.
Okay, we're still waiting. They were set to take about a 10-minute break, so we understand that they are coming back into the room to resume. So far, Jessica, has there been any specific smoking gun that you think has just really just blown the top off of this one?
So it's such a good question. I think that the conversation we just had about the White House security official and how, one, that we're not hearing from him specifically because there's still ongoing fears for him and what is potentially retribution for his testimony. And two, again, the idea that any high-ranking members of the U.S. government are in that type of danger is astonishing in and of itself. But the threat comes from a group that's been sent by the President of the United States to the Capitol on a day that, let's remember, is supposed to be really a non-event. I mean, we never used to cover the idea that, well, the vice president is just giving a rubber stamp to the Electoral College vote. Everybody was there just to count up the votes that had already been counted and that had been certified by all the states. This was supposed to be the most ministerial of tasks. The vice president constitutionally really doesn't have any authority except to get out his rubber stamp and say, I added, I saw it, I got it, thank you. And the fact that that was a day where we have members of the Vice President's Security Council apparently calling their loved ones. I mean, we've seen it play out. We've talked about it before, but it's still astonishing to hear, again, this under oath testimony. It's something I hope we never know.
Calling their loved ones. Meanwhile, from the testimony tonight, former President Trump was calling on senators and allies to try and get the electoral vote count delayed.
Right. And I think this is, President Trump was incredibly consistent with his goals, and he very clearly wanted the counting to stop, and he wanted these quote unquote alternative, although we know that really just means fake, slate of electors to be sent to the Electoral College to be counted. All of this, I think, is important to remember, is just outside the bounds of the Constitution. And all of this, I think, is important to remember, really should have nothing to do with your views on tax policy, immigration policy, climate change, environmental issues. Again, this just has to do with whether or not our nation's leaders are performing their constitutional duties. And I think it is important, we've touched on this before, that we're hearing from people who are Republicans, who worked for the president, who wanted him to succeed. And they're the ones who are telling this disturbing story. And again, I think it's worth emphasizing, this isn't something we're hearing based on a press conference.
Right, absolutely. It's under oath testimony. Okay, the hearing is resuming. Jessica Levinson, Loyola law professor, we always appreciate your analysis.